Whether you're conquering professional exams or personal milestones, we welcome you to Beyond Clean's Confidence Certification, the 52-week test prep podcast series. With expert insights, actionable tips, and engaging discussions, we'll break down the toughest concepts in sterile processing and build your confidence every step of the way. Join host Sarah B. Cruz as she embarks on a mission to help you not just prep for tests, but craft your success story. And now your host, Sarah B. Cruz.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Confidence Certification, a 52-week test prep podcast series to equip you to take your sterile processing career to the next level. I'm your host, Sarah B. Cruz, and on this episode, we are going to be talking a little bit about what it looks like to have a professional community. A lot of this season, we've been speaking on how to apply the study skills we worked out in that last season, and then really making measurable goals and measuring our successes in real, tangible ways. As always, you guys know I love a good action step, right? So what better than to make sure we are surrounding ourselves with the professionals, the colleagues, the family members, and I'm sure there's a bunch of little niches in between that our host Jamie Shelosky can go over with us, and really build out that community that we need to have effective test-taking skills and, take confident certification. It's going to be a good time. And without further ado, Jamie Shelosky. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for coming. I remember hearing Jamie give a presentation about what it meant to have a professional community when she came to the Connecticut HSPA chapter, which I'm so fortunate to be a president of. And I just knew we had to bring her onto the Beyond Clean platform to really take this chance to talk about a community and having the right people around you. Because, Jamie, I don't know if maybe you could weigh in on this, but sometimes I have so many people around me, but they're not moving in the same direction as me. Has that ever happened to you? And what does that look like on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's actually one of the joys in life, that we're not surrounded with people who are all working towards the same goals or even in the same roles. I think in sterile processing, everyone does have a collective goal, a similar job title. There's not a lot of hierarchical structure. Most of the people are technicians, but in the grand scheme of life and work, everyone is always working in different departments and different areas. Like if you take the hospital as a whole, you can see how everyone has their area of expertise and is working towards their goals. The trouble at work is if all those goals don't have a collective goal in mind, and then that's where you get a lot of conflict. But in terms of wanting something different than the people around you, I think we can actually see that as a positive instead of a negative, so that we don't create conflict.
I love that. And, how long have you been in sterile processing? I know you've been in multiple roles within the industry. So how long has that been happening, and how has your community changed?
Yeah, so I've been with Proper Manufacturing Company for 7.5 years now, which time flies. And prior to that, I worked for a orthopedic surgery implant company. And so I interact a lot with sterile processing then, but as a vendor, as a OR rep. So dropping off trays, I was sort of the enemy in that situation.
Hopefully within 48 hours, right? Right,
yeah,
Jamie?
every single time, 48 hours, just always perfectly early. We were not on the wall of shame. Never been up there. Nope, that's a lie. But yeah, so I've been in the industry for 7.5 years.
Oh, that's great. And what was it like first getting your sterile processing certification? Now, you have the certification that's offered through the HSPA specific towards vendor and manufacturing partners in the industry. Like, what was it like getting ready for that exam? Yeah,
so like I mentioned, I was familiar with the concept of sterile processing from the ortho vendor tray side, a loaner tray side. But when I came into Proper, I obviously had to learn what it actually meant beyond being on the wall of shame, because I wasn't in the optimal scenario with our loaner trays. And that unto itself was hugely important to me and my growth, to just understand what was happening and how much science and knowledge and experience had to go into this, that it really truly was more than a fancy dishwashing area of the hospital. And so I actually first became aware of the CCSVP, so the vendor partner certification, early in my time at Proper. And I immediately ordered the books and got ready to prepare. And so I initially was exposed to the science and learning how the science interacts with our products. It took me quite a long time to actually take the exam. You have to get observation hours, which I had to build relationships to be able to be in facilities. And I have to say, I'm really glad that that is a requirement, the facility experience, because it does help you to see the day to day, and you have to spend time in two different departments. So you can see some differences between facilities. And so my initial pass at studying, thinking I was going to take it right away, was really about the science. By the time I actually took the exam and passed, which is in 2022, I then could really pair all of the experiences I had, being a co-chair for Amy, having real relationships with sterile processing technicians and leadership, and all the experience I had as an educator and as someone who's involved in the sterile processing community, to learn how things are being applied and when they may not be applied, what the reason for that is, and all the knowledge gaps that may be existing in our community.
I like that. So I think you touched on a few points that we've gone over most of the past 11 episodes in this little season group here. So just to reiterate what I'm hearing, Jamie, it sounds like you learned the how. You were learning the ropes and doing your thing inside the facilities. And then you said that I needed to get the manual so that I could study. So now you're transitioning from learning the how to learning the why with your technical manuals. It sounds like you did a self-study journey. There wasn't a pre-designed course for that, so you really had to take that on your own. And these are all points we touched on this season, and combining the use of using the book and, integrating the how into the why. And then I also want to take a second to appreciate that you even got more how in your externship hours, dare I say, working within the communities, the OR and the SPD, right? So that you could come together and paint that really nice picture. So can you speak a little bit to how that circle started to develop and change? And maybe you want to just put a quick little, Webster Dictionary says, what a professional circle is and what it means to actually have a group of individuals make up your community.
So those who are listening, who are starting to wonder if they've been tricked into a podcast about networking, Sarah and I have made the conscious decision to use the term professional circle and professional community here because, one, networking has a really bad rap. And two, I think that it is more accurate to say your professional community. It's not a list of names on a page that you're sort of strategically reaching out to when you need them. In fact, if that's how you're viewing networking, then come on in and jump on our bandwagon about community because it's not working for you anyway. Your professional circle is the people, the organizations, the entities that make up your professional life. So your working life. That may be your coworkers, your coworker friends. That may be the departments you've worked for, your leadership, past and present. It also requires and asks you to include organizations like HSPA, CBSPD, AORN, whoever you're getting education from beyond clean, and your vendor partners. So the companies that provide you with things and support in your journey. And the reason I feel that it is essential to consider entities is because sometimes the individuals that you're partnering with are somewhat irrelevant. For example, if you're a customer of Proper and I'm supporting you through your education and providing you with marketing support, IFUs, what have you, and I win the lottery and no longer work for Proper anymore, the truth is, as much as I know you'll miss me, I don't really matter in that equation. It matters that you continue to get that type of support from a representative at Proper.
Yeah, I like how you broke that down and really just took it. It was almost like a triangle. You took it like from the top and then disseminated it out. And I appreciate that form of logic just because it really helps you understand that foundation and then how it applies and trickles out, dare I say. So we're going to put a pin in that and let's take a little break and hear a word from our sponsor. Thanks, guys. We'll be right back. It's time for our mid-episode confidence boost, where we focus on a key sterile processing test concept. Now, there's no guarantee these concepts will be on the test that you take, but they are key concepts to the workplace and are discussed in the literature. Today, we'll cover validation versus verification. Two important terms sterile processing professionals need to know and understand. Validation is the documented procedure for obtaining, recording, and interpreting the results required to establish that a process will consistently yield product-complying predetermined specification. In English, validation demonstrates that what the manufacturers have tested for actually happened. Validation is performed by the manufacturers, not the end users. Verification is the documented procedures performed in the user environment for obtaining, recording, and interpreting the results required to establish that predetermined specifications outlined by the manufacturers. This is defined in the AAMI TIR 12, Designing, Testing, and Labeling Medical Devices for Reprocessing in Healthcare Facilities, a guide for medical device manufacturers. Both validation and verification provide a total picture of quality in our practices, processes, equipment, chemicals, and all other aspects of sterile processing integrity. That's going to wrap this week's mid-session confidence boost. Good luck. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again after our little break. If you're joining us after the break, go ahead and restart this episode. And you know what? While you're at it, just restart the whole series. And just going to need you to do a little binge listening of the Confidence Certification podcast because we are here talking to Jamie, and she is talking about what it means to know your professional circles and building a community. Because this season, we have really been talking about how to take our study habits and create smart goals and really making actionable and tangible success plans. And a huge part of that is making sure you're surrounded by the, quote, right people. And as Jamie was alluding to in the beginning of this episode, sometimes having people with different goals around you can be really beneficial, especially because you guys can talk back and forth. And when you're looking at that collegiate support, a lot of the times being on a journey with someone, even if it's towards a different goal, is so encouraging. There's just something about being able to reach out to someone and say, oh my gosh, I just learned the sterilization chapter and dynamic air removal just destroyed my brain. And they get it. You know what I mean? There's just some power between somebody who may already be working towards their healthcare leadership certification that can relate to that. So Jamie, I'm wondering though, have you ever had to prune, dare I say, or remove people from your professional community? If so, what was that like? And what were some indications that maybe you guys had outgrown each other?
Sure. So not an individual, but I actually very recently had a scenario where I had joined a professional organization's local chapter and was supporting them on some activities for an event. And I had joined this chapter to learn a bit more about the organization, grow my professional community, and overall just sort of see what opportunities there might be out there for me within this organization. And after a few months of participating, I realized that I didn't have enough to learn from the organization at that point. And I had a lot of responsibilities that were growing with other organizations that I felt a little more aligned with. And so I actually had to let them know that at this point, my responsibilities are growing elsewhere and I don't have the time to dedicate to that community. And
wow. That was, hang on a second, because that was, what a courageous conversation. Like, if that's awesome. If we could put an insert for a round of applause here, that did not sound like an easy conversation. And the level of self-awareness and that kind of sounds like an ongoing trend in understanding your community. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was just, that's awesome. Please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't easy because one, we all like helping people. We don't want to let people down. And it can sometimes be awkward to feel like we made a mistake. Like, did I make a mistake by joining that organization to begin with? What I reflected on was that I had meaningfully contributed during the time that I was a part of that organization actively. It's not a statement on them in any way, shape, or form that it doesn't fit into my life anymore. It simply doesn't fit into my life as it is right now. And it serves them to have someone who's more committed to the organization than someone who's sort of feeling trapped and continuing to show up just because they feel like they have to, rather than allowing them the opportunity to find people who are really committed to the work there. And there are other organizations like Professional Women in Healthcare. And so if I see that there is a space that's just occupying time, I'm not contributing as much as I might like to, and I'm also not gaining what I'd like to. It made it a little easier to have that comparison. If you're talking about an individual who's maybe not fitting, I think I haven't had that experience, but I might handle it a little bit differently.
Interesting. I'm kind of trying to make a checklist in my head. Like, if this was a downloadable PDF, I feel like the first, and you guys already know how I feel about a to-do list, don't do it. But this checklist, it sounds like the first thing you have to do is have an honest assessment with yourself to see if it's actually working for you. And then the next step would be determining how to have that conversation with the party or parties involved and start to break away from that group, as uncomfortable or person as it could be. Would you say those are a good first two steps? And what would you add as like the third or the fourth?
Yeah, I think that that's a perfect checklist if it's like a group setting that you're exiting. And I would say exactly what you described: evaluate the need to leave, plan your exit. And it doesn't have to be a conversation. I mean, in this situation, I sent an email. I think that that's heavily dependent on the level of rapport that you have and the longevity of your experience there. For example, if I had a reason to exit my chair position, my vice chair position with Professional Women in Healthcare, that's an organization I'm deeply, deeply involved with. And I hope that that situation never arises. But those relationships, I think, are stronger for me. I would want to have a in-person, face-to-face conversation. Probably not actually in person, but virtual face-to-face conversation. If you've been the person on the group where you're sort of just lurking at this point, you're signing on to meetings and, it just doesn't make sense anymore, I think it's perfectly fine to put that in an email and as transparently and politely as you can. If this is an individual, so I'm going to set an example of when you might want to prune your community. Let's say there's somebody who is a professional colleague from the past who you've stayed connected with, but perhaps they bring a negative attitude to your conversations. And so you're starting to wonder if this person makes sense to have in your life. I think it's a lot more complicated for individuals and when dealing with people, because we all have our emotional connections and emotions are not logical. And also, you deserve to keep your peace. And so with an individual, I think that that's a scenario of limiting and setting boundaries. if you are completely prepared to like never speak to this person again, which I think you need to be very cautious and think about there, your checklist would include what impact could that have on me now and in the future? Is there a chance that person could help you in your career later? Have they been a good support to you and they're going through a negative time? But there, I think you can set, and all of this is really about boundaries, but there, I think you can set maybe a looser boundary than with an organization where you have formal meetings that you may want to no longer participate in. And those may be communicated directly to the individual, or they may just be within yourself. And we all know that boundaries have to be enforced by yourself anyway. So it almost doesn't matter if they're directly articulated. But if somebody was a part of my life and it was no longer supporting me, I might just put some distance and slowly allow that relationship to separate rather than putting some formality to it. And in that case, I definitely wouldn't put formality to it in writing.
Right. No, I really appreciate that. Personally, in my professional development journey, a lot of the times I've gotten a promotion or a change in my title, I've had to go to a different facility to achieve that. Not a job hopper, okay? Like, first of all, it was a career. It was a career move. That's what I called it, not a job hopping. I had good tenure at the facilities before I left. But a lot of the issue that I faced in my professional communities in the spaces was as I was trying to grow professionally, they couldn't view me as that next level of myself. It wasn't any undoing or ill will of their own. It's just, they had known me as the person that took maybe a little 5-minute too long break. So when I'm showing up as a supervisor and now I'm asking them to not take a long break, it looks a little different, right? So me personally, I know that in order to achieve that, I had to move forward in my career at multiple facilities. I think it made me well-rounded. But with that, I also had to reset my community and my professional circle every time I started somewhere. So it came with its own different challenges, right? And you take people from your previous communities and you bring them along with you. I know personally, I've had to have very difficult, not even courageous conversations. They were just straight up hard. Like, let's get alliteration aside. They were just some hard conversations that I did not really want to have. Okay. Like, we've all had those, and sometimes you just have to, for me personally, I had to actually talk to the person and say, hey, I know we're friends outside of work, but I can't talk to you like that here. And if that's going to be an issue, we have to figure out how that looks. You know what I mean? So much so that even in my social media aspect, I have my professional facing social media and then I have my private social media. I'm not a different person on either of them. You still get this lovely, punny, dad jokey, obnoxious Sarah B. Cruz, yes, that's nerd, right? So it's like you still get this nerd, but in a different capacity where it's like, I'm sharing personal things about myself on my private social media. That's not something I would share with my professional community. So I think those are all really great examples of understanding our needs and wants, which are the baseline of boundaries. Wouldn't you say, Jamie?
100%. And I think there's two things I want to address. One of them is simply that our work lives and our home lives don't have to be as intermingled, or I should say, they can be as intermingled as you want them to be. And some people will be more open to sharing everything, and some people will be more private. And that's true in all aspects of their lives. So I think that setting the boundaries that allow us to be the best professional and best person that we could be is absolutely essential. The second thing that I wanted to address that you said is that idea of becoming the boss, and I have air quotes there, the boss of your former colleagues is wildly difficult. It is such a challenge to have that dynamic. I think it creates resentment. It creates comparison. And so while, you mentioned job hopping, I think that's just a term that boomers have given us for the fact that people don't stay in their jobs long enough because promotions aren't always possible. But especially in a space like sterile processing, where like we mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of hierarchy. There's sort of one supervisor, one manager, and then a lot of technicians. It's very reasonable that you would have to change because that leader in your department may be perfectly happy and qualified to stay there. And so there's just not that opportunity. And I think it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, that sometimes it's good to be surrounded by people with different goals and not to let other people's goals frame your perspective of yourself. So if, in those difficult conversations, what I would want to say to the people who had some difficulty, well, yeah, it's super annoying for the person who took a 5-minute break to tell you don't take a 5-minute break. Like, I think we can all agree that that's a tough spot to be in. I would wonder if that person was feeling some self-doubt or reflecting on themselves negatively because you got an elevation while they did not, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with them. So some of this mindfulness about how people may be feeling about themselves can also be really helpful if you're thinking like, do I need to cut this person out of my existence? Do I need to distance myself, create new boundaries? And why might they be giving me a hard time, or why may this relationship not be working right now?
That was so good. And we don't even need to take a commercial break. If you guys hit your 15-second rewind, just hit it like 20 or 30 more times and listen to that clip again, because now we're going to take all that baseline. It's more than philosophy, right, Jamie? Like, now we're going to take all of that. And now, in your opinion, Jamie, again, opinion, if it doesn't resonate with you, just leave it behind. If it vibes, coming out with Jamie and me. But in your opinion, how can knowing your professional circle or even your community, like you're not in sterile processing yet, you are maybe somebody just out of high school and you're thinking about becoming a sterile processing professional, maybe you're in your 30s and you're thinking about a career change, or, so many things bring us to sterile processing, right? So taking all of this, how can knowing our professional community or our circle help us achieve our certification and support us in that endeavor?
So the thing that I imagine our listeners are saying to themselves is, I don't think I have a professional circle. I have colleagues. I may or may not like them, but do I even have a circle? Do I have a network, right? That word's going to be creeping back in there. And so I think it starts with answering that, like, who is your circle? And you get to choose kind of, it's almost like a tree, in elementary school. I feel like they cut open a tree and they show you, the number of rings is how old this tree is. Some person probably actually knows about trees and they're like, that's incorrect. But,
lies.
that's my memory. You can take it up with my like 3rd grade teacher, right? So first you have to know who they are. And these are the people that you rely on throughout your day. And this is an active process. It wouldn't be fair to the listeners to not say that this is truly an active process. So you need to take the time to know who your people are, and not only to know who they are, but to be consistently connecting with them. Sarah, you mentioned that you felt like you were restarting in new departments. And I would encourage you to, in your next transition, to not look at it as a complete restart, but to say these are people, and you did say that the people from your past move forward with you, but to really identify those key people, to say these are the people I want to make a concerted effort to stay connected with, and to do so in an appropriately routine way. If you're thinking like, oh man, I wish I had stayed in touch with so-and-so, I can give a couple of tips about what you can do to reconnect. One, this is, look at your calendar and say, what time of year am I listening to this? And is there a good external reason? So is it the holidays? Is it, a new season? Like, everyone loves to comment on the weather. Just a reason to reach out. Is there something you'd like to share about yourself or your own progress? So getting a promotion, changing your job, great opportunity to reconnect with your community. Hey, I'm going to be transitioning to this new department. I'm transitioning to this new role. Just wanted to let you know and see what you're up to. But also you can use articles and knowledge. And that's where I start to think this gets connected to studies and certification most closely. Everyone has moments in their studies where they're unclear about something. And knowing who to go to get fact and data-based information is so helpful. Someone who can translate numbers on a page into something you understand. And it's really important that that person is not going to give you their perspective or their thoughts on the topic as much as they're going to give you facts when you're studying. So a great example came up in a conversation that I had with Kenneth Campbell and John Wilder during Sterile Processing Week 2023. Check out Proper's LinkedIn or Proper Academy to listen. But during that, we spoke about how important it is for technicians to have a voice in AMI planning committees and working committees. And that is because they can contribute the day-to-day life experience, not because every department's day-to-day work structure is perfect. And we all have areas that maybe we do the minimum required rather than the best practice. And so when you're studying and preparing and you know who the people in your circle who know best practice, because that's what they want to know on the test, not minimum accepted, you can rely on those people within your community to succeed ultimately. Another great example that comes to mind is our friend Angie, who talks a lot about test preparation and how challenging test taking can be for people with English as a second language. If English is a second language for you, having someone in your community who can help you to navigate some of those complexities based on their experience, not based on theory, like I would be a terrible resource for that, but Angie would be a perfect resource for that, is going to help you reach your goal more efficiently.
I really appreciate that last segment too, just because in my full-time position, I worked with a professional whose primary language was Polish. I am not Polish. I am very Irish. I like potatoes and I'm very pale. So
any stereotypes.
And it's interesting because as the professional was trying to get certified, one of the recommendations I made was make a list of all the words that you don't understand in English, and let's see if we can get them translated into Polish. So that's what we did, and we sought out a professional to help us in that endeavor too. And some of it did include Google Translate, not necessarily the best outlet, but it was certainly a starting point. So
we use the resources we have.
Definitely. So as we start to wrap this episode, Jamie, we like to give our listeners homework. They probably don't like it, but hopefully they're keeping a notebook or a journal of all of our past homework assignments because they really help develop that professional aspect and that focus on who they are as a test taker. So I'm thinking maybe their homework should be make a list of who would be in their community and have that objective thought about pros and cons for each one. What do you think?
I think that would be a great assignment. I want to layer on top of it because I also love assigning homework. And what I would say is that I want to challenge your listeners to connect with someone new. That's the hardest part of building a professional community. It's easy to say, okay, I have this supervisor, I have this rep, I have this person. I love the idea that you brought to the table to make a list and really know what they bring to you so that you can know who to go to when you have a question. And I just want to level that up that maybe after you do that assignment, what's missing? And how can you fill that gap? And my challenge is to identify that person and find a way to connect with them. And it doesn't mean you're getting married. This can be looking on LinkedIn. This can be take the easy way out. Connect with me or Sarah, right? But gather that courage to put yourself out there, share your goals, share how we might be able to help you, and grow your community.
That's awesome. Okay, guys, so you've got a double-layered homework assignment, maybe homework suggestion. All right, we'll go with that. All right, take it easy on yourself. And remember, no one's going to see that list, but Jamie and I are going to know if you did it, if you all reach out to us. And don't forget, you can reach out to Beyond Clean at info@beyondclean.net, especially if you have questions about the podcast or you're looking for more information about any of the topics we talked about today. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the benefits of knowing your professional community and really developing that circle so that we can take our certification tests with confidence.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. Have a great day.
All right, guys. See you guys next week. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. For more sterile processing education and resources, make sure to visit beyondclean.net or follow Beyond Clean on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out over 1,000 SPD-related videos at youtube.com/beyondclean. If you have any questions or comments for the show, you can reach out to info@beyondclean.net. Finally, make sure to download the Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple and Android app stores so that you don't miss a future episode of any of the other awesome Beyond Clean podcasts. My name's Sarah B. Cruz, and you've been listening to Confidence Certification. Until next time, keep fighting dirty and pass that test with confidence.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series are of Sarah B. Cruz only and do not represent the companies she works for or collaborates with.